My name is Tony Felker. I'm President and CEO of the Frisco Chamber of Commerce, and welcome back to our newest installment of Conversations with the Chamber. For those of you who may have looked at some of our other videos, what we're doing is trying to educate our business community on topics that are important to them as it relates to getting through this current COVID-19 crisis, and more importantly, how to position each of our companies, your companies, in a way that'll make recovery as quick as possible and as strong as possible. We've had several videos that have been out there so far where we've talked about SBA loans, we've talked about negotiating real estate loans. Today, we're going to be talking about a lot of HR and insurance topics. Coming up during next early part of next week, we'll have another one on magic cash flow. And we encourage you to, when you take a look at those, share those with other people. We want to make certain that everybody can get as much of this information as possible. One of the things that I've learned as we go through this crisis, in addition to learning about Zoom conferencing, is what is my area to be in and what is not my area to be in. And definitely insurance and HR issues, very important, but it's not my area. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the moderating over to Mr. Chris Lee, our Governmental Affairs Manager for the Chamber. And he is going to introduce our guest today, as well as additional staff members, and take it from there. So Mr. Chris Lee, take us out, sir.
Hey, thanks, Tony. So today we've got Tami Alexander, our HR person here at the Chamber, as well as Dustin Paschal and Heather Bowers. I apologize if I've misstated your names, but thank you all so much for being here today. And we're excited. In my role as Government Relations Manager, a bill that was passed through Congress that opened up the emergency family leave and paid sick leave that we're currently talking about and dealing with. And so, again, not my area of expertise, but that's why we brought all of y'all in so that we can have a little bit of a conversation about what that means. I know from my perspective, it's passed and it's here and it's a great protection for some of our workers, but some of it's going to be impacting our businesses day to day and how it actually impacts them. So, Dustin, I'm going to go ahead and just start with you and do a short introduction of yourself. We'll go with you, Dustin, and then once you're done, Heather, if you want to do just a quick introduction, and then we'll kind of dive in a little bit further.
Sure. My name is Dustin Paschal. I am an employment lawyer with Paschal PLLC. We kind of do employment law mostly, but do some business law as well, and we're very active in the Frisco community.
Perfect. And my name is Heather Bowers. I'm with Lone Star Benefits. We are a group insurance agency here in Frisco. We work with employers on their employee benefit programs.
Awesome. And of course, we have to include Tami as well. So please, Tami, introduce yourself.
I wasn't expecting to answer. Sorry, I'm Tami Alexander, and I'm the Senior Vice President here at the Frisco Chamber of Commerce.
Awesome. So as I've said, phase 2 passed most recently. I believe it was earlier this week. All the dates are blurring together, so I apologize. But Dustin and Heather, if you want to kind of give us a little bit of an overview from your perspective of how that's impacting, or what that included and how that will potentially impact some of our businesses here.
Sure. I don't mind starting. I can run through, I guess, just some basics on the law, and then there's a lot that Heather does and knows that I have nothing to do with, so I'll let her speak to that expertise. But the law did pass, as you said. Phase 2, I know it as the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act, or the FFCRA. That's kind of what, in my world, what I've been calling it. But yeah, it includes the emergency paid sick leave and then the emergency family medical leave expansion act. It goes into effect April 1. So I'm just going to kind of hit some highlights here for folks, but it goes into effect April 1. The good news is that the Department of Labor has come out and said they instituted a 30-day non-enforcement period starting from when it was passed, March 18th, until April 17th. So basically until April 17, employers, as long as you are acting in good faith in trying to comply with the law, the Department of Labor will not institute any enforcement actions against employers for violations. Essentially what that means is they're saying, if you're trying to comply with the law and if you violate it and you learn about a violation and you correct that violation and you're not acting willfully and you confirm to the Department of Labor that you're going to comply with the law, they're not going to enforce it against you until beginning April 18. The reason that's important is because the Department of Labor has not issued yet the interpretive regulations. So without getting kind of too deep into the law, essentially once Congress passes the law, then the agency charged with enforcing that law gets to issue regulations which define terms that otherwise hadn't been defined yet, or interprets things. And so those regulations, the Department of Labor is starting to kind of release FAQs to those issues, but the regulations themselves are not anticipated to be released until early April. And so I think that's why they put that non-enforcement period in there, was to basically say, hey, we understand the interpretive regulations aren't going to come out until early April. So even though the law goes into effect April 1, we won't enforce it against you until starting April 18, so that you can kind of learn how the law works. And the very basics of the law, I'll say that, and then I can pass to Heather. And, but the very basics of the law, the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, essentially outlines 6 reasons where employers have to give paid sick leave to employees if they can fall within those 6 reasons. The first 3 are kind of related to the employee themselves, and then the remaining 3 are related to other individuals. And what it says is it's full pay for the first 3 reasons, 2/3 the regular rate for the second 3 reasons. Excuse me, the dogs are now starting to bark. Hang on 1 second.
Hazards of working from home, we totally understand.
Yeah, my fault. So they get the 6 reasons, and so it's full pay for the first 3, and then 2/3 for those second 3. And there's a cap in place, and I won't go through all those numbers. You can find them on the Department of Labor website. It's very explanatory for how that works. But that's kind of the paid sick leave portion, and it does allow for a tax credit for employees so that they can get, or for employers, so that they can get that immediately and they don't have to float that. And then it gives an expansion of the Family Medical Leave Act, which provides another 10 weeks where the employee, only for the reason of caring for a child whose school or child care facility is closed, they get an additional 10 weeks that can be paid at 2/3 their regular rate. And there's a lot of kind of different flavors and varieties of how all this works. The FAQs on the Department of Labor website grow every single day because they're adding more questions and answers. So my biggest encouragement to employers and to HR people has been bookmark that Department of Labor page, because they're constantly putting out FAQs with answers that kind of answer those questions, like, can I give it intermittently? How does it work if I have to furlough an employee, or if we have to do layoffs, or if we're shut down pursuant to a shelter-in-place order? Kind of all these are starting to get answered. And so whereas it came out and we were all kind of freaked out because we didn't know what was happening or how it was going to be applied, that's now starting to roll out. And I think employers are starting to understand a little bit more how it's going to work for them and their employees.
Perfect. And then I can kind of speak on probably, I would say, the most popular questions that I've been receiving through all of this. So starting, I guess, exactly 2 weeks ago, we started daily getting mass requests of terminating employees, just situations employers are having to do in the times we're at. So the main questions employers are trying to find out in all of this is if they do lay off employees, if they put employees on furlough, if they reduce hours, what's going to happen with benefits. And so, and kind of like Dustin said, daily, the carriers are taking these questions and trying to figure out how they're going to do things. The main number one question I'm getting from everybody is deferring premium payments. So everyone is trying to find out if the carriers are going to accept late payments and or just bill at a later date. I can tell you right now, it's business as usual. So the carriers are expecting payments to continue to come in. Most of them do already have a 30-day grace period. I know, like Blue Cross, for example, you won't even hear from them on a late payment until your 45 days passed. And at 60 days as a broker, we're notified. So definitely carriers already give you some of that leeway. I guess a couple of them have come out and said if there is a special situation that they can work kind of one-off with groups. But I guess my response to that is every employer is going to have a special situation. And so the main thing on that is just to keep the communication open. If you can't get your payment made, reach out to your broker, reach out to the carrier, let them know what's going on, acknowledge that you do know that a premium is due, and let them try to work with you through that. So that's one question. And the other is going back to if employees that are on furlough or laid off can continue on their plan. As of right now, like Blue Cross of Texas, which they definitely own the Texas market when it comes to small employers, they will allow any employee to stay on the group plan through April 30th, whether they're actively at work or if they're laid off or on furlough. The main thing is the premium is still due. So as long as an employer is still paying that premium, they can stay on the plan. United Healthcare, same thing, is letting employees stay on the plan for right now, as long as premiums due. United has gone as far as to say the employer has to continue to contribute their portion of the premium. So employers, if you have employees that you've laid off and you want to offer that insurance to them, you do still have to continue to cover that premium. I've had clients ask, okay, if you have an employee laid off, but you want to offer the insurance to them, what do you do with their portion of premium, the employee's portion of premium, because you no longer have a paycheck to deduct that from? And so my answer on that is that as the employer, you're going to have to collect that premium from the employee. The biggest thing I can say on that is in 2006, Senate Bill 51 was passed, which tells the insurance carriers they don't have to retro terminate an employee's coverage. So employers, giving an example, if you are going to allow an employee to pay you the premium so they can stay on your plan, you need to make sure you collect their premium prior to the month of coverage. So let's say in beginning of April, you lay someone off and you tell that employee they can stay on your plan. You need to make sure you collect that employee's May premium prior to May 1st. Reason being, once we get into the month of May, if you don't collect that premium, because of Senate Bill 51, that employee's coverage cannot be retro-termed to May 1st. So as the employer, you would be paying that premium for them for that month. So that's a huge thing to remember on that. If you reduce their hours, of course, and maybe they're only working 10 hours a week for you now, you can continue to deduct that premium out of their paycheck as you are now. Sorry, I'm looking at some quick notes right here. A couple other things, like, and I pick on the two main carriers because that's the main carriers that people in Texas have, but with Blue Cross right now, they are offering a special enrollment to where employers, if you offer a Blue Cross group plan, and maybe you offer a few different options, because of what's going on, your employees can change the plan they're enrolled in due to special enrollment with Blue Cross. So that's one thing they're doing. One thing United Healthcare is doing is they are opening up a special enrollment to any of your employees that have previously waived coverage. So if you have employees that previously didn't want it and now they want it, they can enroll in the coverage. There are dates on all of that. And I know the Chamber's been putting out information. So yeah, we can get those dates out. I guess a couple other quick things, and I'm not trying to take over, but I've been getting tons of insurance questions. A couple other things. If you have employees that do lose their coverage and you aren't going to continue it for them, and they can't afford continuation through you, whether COBRA or state continuation, it does open up a special enrollment period for them to go back out to the individual market and enroll in coverage. They have 60 days to do that after they lose your group coverage. So there is an opportunity for them to get coverage outside of your group plan at this point. Another question I've gotten, Texas so far has not jumped on this, but 7 states have, that people have asked if Texas is going to open up a statewide special enrollment in the individual market. So again, as of right now, Texas has not. But things are changing daily, so we're just trying to send that information out as we get it. And then I guess the last thing that I would really encourage employers right now is to just, keep the communication open with your employees, be transparent with them on what's going on. Employees are nervous, they're anxious. I'm getting calls from employees. Cigna and United Healthcare both have opened up completely free employee assistance programs to anyone in the country, whether you're covered under their plan or not. So you can provide those numbers to your employees. They can call in 24/7 and speak to board specialists that can help them through anxiety issues, questions, if they have financial frustrations or struggles. So definitely just keep that communication open to your employees. But overall, I guess my great takeaway from this has been how strong and loving our business community really is. Employers are not wanting to get people off their group plan and are not wanting to term employment unless they absolutely have to. So that has been very promising to me to see employers coming out so strong with everything going on.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. It's a lot of information, and I'm sure you'll have a lot more questions coming in the next few days. I'm going to pass it over to Tami. I don't know if you have any questions or if you want to add on to anything you've heard probably from a lot of different HR people and from the chamber and the chamber space. I didn't know if there was anything additional that you might want to include that hasn't been covered already.
Well, the one question that I've seen over and over is the back and forth. So if they're without a job today, but in 2 weeks they're back, and that lapse in insurance and in all benefits on both sides, how is that going to be handled? I mean, if their insurance is dropped and they're now getting the 2 weeks of pay because they fall into one of the first 3 reasons why, the CRA Act. So what's going to happen on the other side? And that is the one question I've seen a lot. Does that make sense?
Dustin,
so as far as insurance would go, if the employer keeps them active on the insurance, whether they get laid off and come back or not, the carrier is not going to see any impact to that. I mean, all the carrier knows is the individual's active on insurance. The only thing would be if the employer terms them from the insurance and then that employee exercises their COBRA or state continuation rights and or doesn't elect either, just chooses not to have coverage. And then if the employer puts them back on their group plan, one question I have received is, would they have to resatisfy a waiting period? And most of the carriers, it depends on the lapse of time from how long they were off of the group plan before they're reinstated. Typically, it's about 60 days. So if they're termed for more than 60 days, the carrier will most likely want that employee to resatisfy the employer's waiting period. However, again, because everything is changing so fast and we're in the most unique situation ever, carriers will be releasing, I'm sure, more data on that as they see how it's impacting their overall book of business.
So one question that I've had and I've seen come up in different places is it talks about the payroll tax credit. I don't know if that's something, Dustin, you can kind of dive into a little bit and how the law kind of outlines the potential for the payroll tax credit that's been outlined before.
Yeah, so some of it let me preface with, because we're constantly changing and because we haven't seen any regulations from the IRS or the Department of Labor or anything like that, I can tell you what I've seen from the Department of Labor, but I think some of it is in flux, determining on the basis of what's the IRS going to do. But essentially the IRS, the Department of the Treasury, and the Department of Labor put out a joint press release Friday, March 20th, basically saying we're not going to require employers essentially to float this paid leave that they're paying, because many employers may not be having the same level of revenue in light of what's going on. And so a lot of employers were saying, so you mean I got to pay it and then I got to wait to get the credit? But what happened was they basically came out and said, no, we're going to give you an immediate credit. And so the way they're doing that is employers make their payroll tax deposits. Some do it biweekly, some do it monthly, however you do it. But you make your payroll tax deposit, which is the federal income tax, the Social Security, the Medicare, and you do those tax deposits with the IRS. What they're saying is that essentially you're going to be able to withhold from those deposits an amount equal to the qualified paid leave you pay under the Act, under the new law. And so kind of like as an example, let's say that you've paid $5,000 to various employees for either emergency paid sick leave or emergency family medical leave, and your regular payroll tax deposit is $10,000. What they're saying is that you can withhold that $5,000 that you paid from the $10,000 deposit. You only have to deposit $5,000. So there's your 100% tax credit. Kind of on the inverse, what they're saying is, let's say you've paid $10,000 in qualified paid leave benefits and your payroll tax deposit is only $5,000. They're saying you can withhold the full $5,000, and then there's going to be a form that's released by the IRS. I haven't seen it released yet, but a form released by the IRS that you can file for an accelerated payment of that additional $5,000 that you paid in qualified leave, so you can get that right back in your coffers to cover it. So they're doing everything they can to make sure that employers are not having to float those paid leave payments. And in essence, they are paid leave from the government. I mean, because employers are saying, I'll pay it, but I'm getting it right back from the government in essence. So that's kind of how that's going to work. Now, in terms of the forms that are going to be released to get those accelerated payments, we don't know. And then also in terms of the documentation that employers are going to have in terms of qualifying, because remember, there's certain reasons to qualify for the paid leave. So as an employer, you're going to have to get that documentation, whether it be a copy of a federal, state, or local order quarantining somebody, or a copy of a doctor's note saying, I'm directing you to stay home under self-quarantine, or a copy of, they even went so far as to say a copy of like a screenshot from a website that says daycare is closed, if you're going to make use of the provision about having to use the leave due to your child's childcare being closed. But you are going to have to document the reason for the leave, because the IRS or the Department of Treasury or whoever it may be, they're going to want that documentation since you're getting a credit for it. And so, like I said, there's a lot of things that are going to have to be figured out there, because I've also seen that the IRS or the Department of Treasury is not going to make employers withhold withholdings from the paid leave payments to employees. So there's a lot that still has to be flushed out there. But at least with what we're seeing, it's not going to come out of employers' pockets at the end of the day.
Gotcha. Okay. Heather, was there anything else? I didn't know if you might have had another comment. Okay. Well, good to know. So a few quick takeaways that I've kind of gotten from the group here. Things are moving rapidly and we're in flux. The Department of Labor is working on getting as much information out as possible. Our different insurance groups and providers are all trying to work with everyone that they service as best they can. So those are just a few takeaways. Some things that I think are important for businesses to take away from this, I think, are just understand that we're in flux, but also document as much of this as you can, because a lot of that documentation is going to be required as far as insurance providers and getting those paid, or the payroll tax credits as well. So I think that's definitely a big point that I want people to walk away with. And then just open those lines of communication with your providers, your different insurance providers. Make sure that you're talking with them, whether it's to pay premiums or anything along those lines. If you're struggling with that, make sure you're opening those lines of communication. Is there anything else that you think somebody should walk away from this knowing? I know there's a lot of information here, but just a few highlights that I just wanted to touch on from our end. Is there any other comments from y'all?
Yeah, I'd say just a couple of other quick things to keep in mind. The Department of Labor has also said that employers that have fewer than 50 employees, so kind of these true small business employers, they are going to be exempt from the new law with respect to any leave related to having to take care of a child related to a school or childcare facility being closed. So that's a big benefit to those smaller employers that say, put aside the money, because we know there's a tax credit, but I can't have an employee off for 12 weeks related to that. They're basically saying that employers that have fewer than 50 employees will be exempt from the law with respect to that provision, but you're going to have to establish that complying with the law would jeopardize your business as a going concern. So again, it goes back to that documentation, being able to document, like, how is this financially going to harm you? How is this going to harm you from an operational standpoint? Those kinds of things. You're going to have to be able to document that. There's no application or anything to the Department of Labor for that exemption, but you're going to have to at least have that documentation internally, so that if someone makes a claim against you and you try to come back and say, no, I'm exempt because I'm less than 50 employees, you need to be able to establish that exemption. That's probably something you really want to work with a lawyer on, just because there's some legal liability there if you're wrong. So I would encourage you to consult your lawyer on that, but at least there's going to be some help there.
Okay, and I was going to ask in there if you might have an example of some documentation. I know we're going to encourage people to reach out to the lawyers, but if there's something I can be doing right now as a small business to document some of that stuff if I'm impacted, what's something I can be doing?
Yeah, I mean, you can just even internal memos. You can say, XYZ employee brings in this much in revenue. They're a sales employee and they bring in this much in revenue. If I have to give them 12 weeks of leave, not only am I having to pay them for being off that 12 weeks, what they would normally bring into the company in terms of revenue, I don't have. Or I only have one person that works in accounting, and that person has a child and that child's school is closed. If I have to lose that employee for 12 weeks, I no longer have an accounting person in my company, and I have to be able to handle my bills and all that. So it's just kind of more along those like common sense explaining why this is going to harm your business. And don't focus necessarily just on the financial piece, because remember, there is that tax credit. So it might be a little bit more difficult to argue it's going to be a financial hit if you've got that tax credit. So you want to focus on both the financial side, but also the operational side, and not just payroll to them, but also, again, if you've got a sales employee, like what kind of volume of sales are they bringing in that you would lose? So it's not just I have to be out the salary to them. I'm going to be out all that revenue that they bring in that affects other people's salaries. So you just kind of want to outline all that. And then the only other thing I'd add real quick is in terms of unemployment, I'm getting a lot of calls from employers about what do I tell my employees about unemployment? Because I'll agree with Heather. They're all doing their best to try to keep their employees employed and take care of them. Everyone absolutely is. But you get to that point where you don't have a choice anymore. It's either the business is gone, and so those employees are going to be without a job, or I have to let some go so that the business survives and I'm saving jobs for as many as I can. I would tell those employers to tell your employees unemployment's going to be there. They're infusing cash into the unemployment system. They're going to get that unemployment compensation. And even if you keep an employee on your payroll and just, for instance, say, hey, I'm going to put you on leave because I've got no work for you, but I want to keep you as an employee, you can do that and the employee is still eligible for unemployment. So even though they haven't technically been laid off and they're still an active employee, and they're still on the payroll, they're just not working any hours or earning any compensation, they can still go get unemployment. So there are options out there for employees that employers would be wise to kind of counsel employees through.
I think that's a great point, especially as some of these businesses trying to make these tough decisions. I think that's a great point for businesses to know so that they can keep people on as best they can, but still offer those employees some options in this pretty tough time. So, well, again, I want to thank everybody. Tony, do you want to have any final remarks, any other questions that you might have?
Yeah, my only final remarks is my head is hurting right now. And so I just wanted a quick question. I mean, in our office, Tami is there. She's an expert at this sort of stuff. When she has a few questions, we're lucky enough that we reach out to the two of you and we've got things covered. For a small business, I picked up on something that Heather said, that most businesses should love the way they wanted to hold on to their employees. It sounds to me like communication with employees is a very big deal. Try to be honest with your employees, what you're trying to do. Have them let you know what they want to be doing, if they need to be moving, things like that. So open communication, both directions. But for a small company, anybody watching this video, please get it to your HR people in your company. But if a smaller company needs assistance, and Dustin, you and Heather only have so much bandwidth, where does somebody turn if they need some additional assistance or have questions? What is the backup for them?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of backups. So like I said, the Department of Labor website is doing some phenomenal things right now in terms of the FAQs and the information out there. I mean, they are really doing their best to answer those questions. And so for people who have questions, I'd go to the Department of Labor website. They've got a special link for coronavirus resources. Click there. The same goes for the Texas Workforce Commission website. They're doing a great job. I know there's a cost factor involved, but there are organizations out there. Dallas HR, I'm a part of Dallas HR. I know that Heather's a part of Dallas HR. Tami's a part of Dallas HR. They've got resources on their website that are free and open to people who are not members. And then I know they're working to try to work out a program where perhaps some people who aren't members can get a temporary free membership. I don't want to speak out of turn, but they're working on that to maybe try to get that out so that people that do have questions have places to go.
Heather, on your end?
Yeah, for the insurance side, definitely the carriers' websites. All of them have special COVID-19 sections of their website where they're putting their decisions out as quickly as possible. So any of the insurance carriers would be a great place to start.
Very good. And Tami, any closing thoughts from your part?
No.
Catch you by surprise again.
Sorry, I count on Dustin and Heather more than y'all know. So I am not the expert. I just have two people that make me look like I am the expert. So thank you.
Well, we want that, and we want everybody to be experts. We know, as we said, you know, this is uncharted waters for everybody. We appreciate you guys taking the time to help educate our business community. Chris, thanks for moderating through that very complicated stuff. And our whole point is to hopefully have businesses that are out there that are struggling with these decisions. We want to get them as much information as possible before they take some action so that they know as much as possible what the consequences may be, what their different choices are, so they can make the best decisions going into those things, as Dustin, you said, if and when it becomes necessary, but also to put themselves in the best position to come out of this as strong as possible. So we're going to continue to do these conversations with the Chamber. We'll bring in other professionals in different areas. Like I said, I believe the next one that we're talking about is about cash flow management, where to find money out there besides payroll, besides real estate. Where are some other areas that we can look at to find cash to get us through this period? But please share these videos with people out there. Let us know what you'd like to hear about. We appreciate the experts being out there, Dustin, Heather, Tami, Chris, in your area. Thanks so much. And everybody, just stay strong, be safe, and let us know what we can do to help you guys. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you all soon.